Hi, I'm Trevor with High-Vis Shooting Systems. Today we're going to install the new Fast Dot handgun sight set. This is a new product we brought out this year. It's a little bit different take on a sighting system. It's a front and rear sight. It's a single dot type system. The front sight is for gross alignment, and once you get in alignment, the rear sight lights up and you'll be on target. So let's go ahead and install this. We're going to install it on a Smith & Wesson M&P, this particular set. It's a dovetailed sight set. Both front and rear sights are dovetailed. So we're going to kind of walk through the process of how I like to fit a dovetail when I install it. All right, I have my slide from the gun stripped down here, and I actually have the old sights removed already. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp this up in the vise, and we're going to start fitting the rear sight. So we're going to start with the rear sight, and most commonly you will have to do some minor fitting on a dovetail sight, whether it's on a handgun, rifle, shotgun, whatever it may be. What we want to achieve is a tight fit between the two angled surfaces here and here and the bottom of the dovetail. We want to have good pressure, but not too tight that we're deforming metal or harming something. All right, so now that I have the rear sight out, I'm just going to test fit it in the slide. There's a possibility it may go in without any fitting. So it starts in the slide, and now I'm going to try to drift it in place and see if I get an excessive amount of pressure trying to drift it in. This is a punch I like to use. It's got a threaded nylon tip. You can unscrew these and replace them. So that way I don't damage it by using a metal to metal or a steel or even a brass punch on it. So I drifted in the dovetail probably about twice as far as it originally went. So it's in there, you know, a little over 1/8 of an inch, but it's starting to require more pressure to push the sight in with the drift. So I'm going to stop at this point. I'm going to take it back out, and I'm going to look at the angles on the face of the dovetails. So I can see that I'm just starting to deform the metal on both the front and the rear of the dovetail. So I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to fit this dovetail down a little bit. My preferred method to do this, or the place I like to start, is by sanding the bottom of the dovetail only. As we sand the bottom of the dovetail, we reduce the overall dimension of the dovetail. It's a very controlled method. There's a lot of surface area on the bottom of the dovetail, especially this rear sight. So we can hold it flat and do that. So what I'm going to do is I got a steel plate here, and I got some 100 grit emery cloth. So I'm going to place the sight, the dovetail base on that emery cloth, and I'm going to sand the bottom of that. And every few strokes I'm going to turn it around, because I could be pushing harder on the front or the rear of the sight. Okay, so as you can see, we've taken some material off of the bottom of the dovetail. So I'm going to sand the bottom of the dovetail. I'm going to check it in the slide, and I'm going to continue that process until I get it to the point where I think I can drift it in place. So by hand it starts a little bit more. Another thing you always want to be careful for is when we're working with dovetail sights, we want to have a chamfer or a corner break on the corners of the dovetail. We always do that in our machining process. They have a corner break on here, but once you start sanding that bottom, you're going to sharpen that corner back up, and you're going to get corner interference with the slide, and that'll give you the illusion that it's a lot tighter than it is, and if you continue to fit, you're going to end up with a loose sight. So after I do that, I'm going to take one of my dovetail files, and I'm just going to take a couple of light strokes right across the corner of the dovetail on both sides, just to give us a little bit of a relief on that corner. And then we're going to try it again. So it goes in a little bit. We're going to see if we can drift it in. I can already tell it's a little bit too tight. So we're just going to continue to repeat this process until we get it down to where it's going to drift into the dovetail. So I've continued to check the sight in the dovetail, sand the bottom of it. Let's see if we can get the sight to drift into place now. All right, so I'm about halfway into the dovetail there. And it's drifting in with reasonable pressure, but not excessive pressure. All right, now that we have the sight installed in the rear of the slide, I've centered it as best I can by eye, but now we're going to go ahead and try to center it with some type of measuring device. Calipers would be appropriate. I happen to have a dial indicator. I'm going to go ahead and use that. All right, so I'm just measuring from the flat surface of the indicator to the side of the sight. I'm going to check both sides, and I'm about 3/1000ths from being perfectly centered, which is as close as we need to be. Now that we have the rear sight installed, we're going to install the front sight. I'll go ahead and clamp my slide back up in the vise. And the process and method that I personally use to check and fit a dovetail and install it is the same regardless whether it's front sight, rear sight, rifle, shotgun. A dovetail, the theory in a dovetail and how you get it to fit are all the same. Goes in a little bit, but I can tell right away that it's too tight. So we're going to take it out and we're going to do a similar process to what we did with the rear sight. So I'm going to start out by sanding the bottom of the sight. All right, now that I've sanded it a bit, I'm going to check it again, see if I made any progress. Not a lot of progress. So we're just going to continue with this process. We're going to check our fit again and see if we're there. All right, it starts in the dovetail, reasonable distance. Let's see if we can drift it in place. Another important thing I want to mention, especially with front sights, rear sights, you got a lot more mass, but you do always want to, if at all possible, drive right on the dovetail itself. The rear sight, I could probably push it in by the side, but you get a lot more leverage when you're pushing on the side of the sight. And the front is even worse. You push on the blade like this, you're going to probably end up compromising or damaging the sight potentially. So I'm going to keep this down on the dovetail. All right, so we can see that this is drifting into place nice. Got a nice, good, tight fit. I think I'm close to center. I'll go ahead and take this out and check it again with my dial indicator. It looks good to me. Within a couple thousandths of being centered. We got our sight set installed on the slide. We can assemble the gun, take it out to the range, try it out. These are dovetail sights. They only fit by pressure, so fitting is critical. You want a good pressure fit. You don't want it too tight. You don't want it too loose. And with the fast dot in particular, a lot of rear sights have set screws in them. The way the fast dot is, the way this is designed, really kind of prohibits us putting a set screw. So you really want to watch that fit on the rear sight dovetail. Reasonably critical. You want to make sure that it's good and straight in the slide and it's got a tight fit. All right, let's go to the range.